The Silent Weapon. The Verax Collective had conquered 37 star systems before they turned their attention to Sol. Their methodology was consistent and effective. Minimal physical destruction, maximum psychological impact. Why waste resources obliterating infrastructure that could be repurposed? Fear was their most efficient weapon, far more economical than their imposing fleet of obsidian warships that now positioned themselves at the edge of Earth's solar system. Supreme Tactician Vextal stood on the command deck of the inescapable Verdict, his four eyes narrowing as they focused on the holographic display of the blue-green planet. The membranous folds of skin around his neck fluttered slightly in what his species considered amusement. Such a primitive world, he observed, voice reverberating through the chamber. Their communication networks are lockably exposed. Their weaponry relies on chemical propellants and rudimentary fission. How many cycles did our analysis predict for total capitulation? His second in command, strategist Rilva, consulted her neural interface. 3 solar cycles, Supreme Tactician. Their political structure is fragmented, their military forces decentralized. Our behavioral models suggest they will attempt resistance initially, but will fracture under systematic pressure. Vextal's upper limbs made a dismissive gesture. Prepare the demonstration broadcast. Target their highest military authorities. Let the humans witness the price of defiance before they've even considered it. On Earth, the United Defense Council had gathered in their subterranean facility beneath Geneva. The chamber hummed with tension as 12 representatives from Earth's most powerful nations sat around a circular table, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of holographic displays. Captain Maya Reyes, newly appointed head of Special Operations, stood calmly at the center of the room. At 38, she was young for her position, but the silver flecks in her dark hair hinted at the stresses that had accelerated her advancement through the ranks. Her uniform bore no decorations, standard protocol for someone whose most significant achievements were classified beyond the clearance of most people in the room. The Verax vessels have maintained their position for the past 17 hours, she reported. Their energy signatures matched those we detected during the fall of Proxima Centauri's colonies 3 years ago. We should anticipate their standard opening move, a planet-wide broadcast showing the execution of leadership figures. General Wei frowned, his weathered face deepening with concern. And you're suggesting we allow this? Captain Reyes nodded. Protocol Nightfall is ready, General. We've been preparing for this exact scenario since we intercepted their transmissions from the Proxima system. Everything depends on the Verax believing their psychological warfare is working. They'll target this facility first, Admiral Okafor pointed out, her Nigerian accent becoming more pronounced with stress. Are we certain the quantum entanglement network will remain functional if this bunker is compromised? Reyes allowed herself a small smile. They won't be targeting this facility, Admiral. They'll target the decoy facility in the Rockies, where our holographic duplicates are currently holding a very convincing emergency session. The Verax pride themselves on thorough intelligence gathering, but they've been gathering exactly what we've wanted them to. Across Earth's data networks, civilian and military communications continued as normal. Satellite transmissions, radio broadcasts, neural net traffic, all flowed with the typical patterns of a planet unaware of the existential threat at its doorstep. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility carved into the Mariana Trench, engineers monitored this carefully orchestrated digital theater. Commander Jackson Chen watched the data flows with satisfaction. The Verax are scanning all our networks, he confirmed. They're mapping what they believe to be our command structure. His fingers tapped across the haptic interface. They're particularly interested in the Decoy Defense Council meeting. Facial recognition, voice pattern analysis. They're being very thorough. His colleague, Dr. Imani Williams, nodded. We've spent 3 years crafting this false digital infrastructure. Every satellite we've launched, every communications node we've established, all designed to be found and exploited. Her eyes gleamed with professional pride. The actual defense network remains completely invisible to them. Aboard the inescapable verdict, Supreme Tactician Vextol received the intelligence report with satisfaction. Their leaders have gathered in a single location. Predictable. They believe their underground facility shields them from detection. He turned to his communications officer. Initiate the broadcast. Cut into all their networks simultaneously. On Earth, every communications device capable of receiving the signal suddenly activated. Screens in homes, offices, public spaces, personal neural interfaces, even archaic radio receivers, all transmitted the same image. The interior of what appeared to be the United Defense Council chamber. The council members sat frozen, eyes wide with shock as armored Verax soldiers materialized around them. A tall Verax figure stepped into frame, its iridescent exoskeleton catching the light. "People of Earth," the alien spoke, its translator rendering the words in flawless global standard. "I am Supreme Tactician Vextol of the Verax Collective. Your world is now under our protection. Resistance is not only futile but unnecessary. We bring order and prosperity. To demonstrate the consequences of rejection, we will now execute your leadership council." The camera panned to Admiral Okafor, who had been forced to her knees before the alien commander. "Remember the stars," she said firmly, looking directly into the camera. The Verax executioner raised his weapon. The feed cut to static for a moment, then resumed showing the remaining council members, their expressions transitioning from defiance to terror. In homes and shelters across Earth, civilians watched the broadcast in apparent horror. But beneath the surface reactions, something else was happening. The phrase, "Remember the stars," activated dormant protocols in military installations worldwide. In orbital platforms disguised as communications satellites, weapons systems silently powered up. In seemingly abandoned mining facilities on the Moon, massive electromagnetic launchers swiveled toward precise coordinates. Captain Rice, watching from the Real Defense Council chamber, nodded to General Wei. "They've taken the bait." Initiating Protocol Nightfall. Wei placed his palm on the biometric scanner before him. Authorization confirmed. "May God forgive us for what we're about to unleash." In that moment, humanity's true face was revealed, not as the fractured, primitive civilization the Verax had analyzed, but as something far more dangerous, a species that had studied their enemy in silence, that had prepared in darkness, and that had learned the art of deception from millennia of practicing it against themselves. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came when 3 Verax support vessels simply vanished from space. Not exploded, vanished, their atomic structure disassembled by precisely targeted gravity wave pulses from what the Verax had dismissed as primitive Earth satellites. "What is happening?" Vextol demanded, as alarms blared across his command deck. "Where is our perimeter fleet?" His tactical officer worked frantically at her station. "Unknown weapon signatures, Supreme Tactician. The humans are deploying technology we didn't detect in any of our scans." On the view screen, the image of Earth remained serene and blue, but from its night side, thousands of pinpoints of light were now rising. Not missiles with their blazing propellant trails, but something that moved without visible propulsion, accelerating to impossible velocities. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from everywhere on the planet simultaneously." The view screen shifted to show Captain Maya Rice, her expression cold and determined. "Supreme Tactician Vextol, you broadcast terror to break your enemies. We broadcast nothing. We watched. We learned. We prepared." Vextol's neck membranes constricted in the Verax expression of rage. "Impossible. Your species has no technology capable of. Your species conquers through fear," Rice continued, cutting him off. "Humanity has lived with fear since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what might be looking back. We've spent thousands of years preparing for the worst of ourselves. Did you think we wouldn't be ready for you?" Around the inescapable verdict, more Verax ships were disappearing as they were struck by weapons they couldn't detect. Others reported massive system failures as human counter-intrusion algorithms tore through their networks, turning their own systems against them. "You studied our public communications," Ray said. "You never found our quantum network because it doesn't interact with electromagnetic waves. You analyzed our visible weapons but missed the ones we kept hidden. A species that broadcasts its atrocities never considers that someone might be watching from the shadows, learning, preparing." As the inescapable verdict shuddered under the first direct hits, Supreme Tactician Vextal finally understood the Verax Collective's fatal miscalculation. They had studied human technology but not human nature. A species that had nearly annihilated itself multiple times had learned to hide its true capabilities even from itself. "The demonstration broadcast ends today," Rice concluded. "You offered no mercy to 37 civilizations. Remember that when you contemplate your response to ours." The Reckoning. The Emergency Council of the Verax Collective gathered in their orbital sanctuary above their homeworld of Veros Prime. The chamber, designed to project strength and confidence with its towering crystalline arches, now felt oppressively small as 12 of the highest-ranking tacticians received the catastrophic reports from the Earth offensive. High Counselor Zivran, her exoskeleton bearing the golden markings of 5 centuries of service, stared incredulously at the holographic display showing the decimated remains of what had been their third fleet. "How?" she demanded, all 4 of her eyes fixed on the intelligence chief before her. "How did a pre-FTL civilization with barely 2 centuries of electronic technology manage this?" Intelligence Commander Korvax shifted uncomfortably. "High Counselor, preliminary analysis suggests deception. Deliberate deception on a planetary scale." "Explain," Zivran ordered, her voice dangerously quiet. "The humans appear to have maintained 2 separate technological infrastructures. The visible one, the one our standard intelligence gathering detected, and a hidden one." Korvax's upper limbs moved in agitation. "They allowed us to see only what they wanted us to see. They fed us carefully crafted misinformation for years." Across the solar system, Captain Myarias coordinated humanity's counteroffensive from the Mobile Command Center Vigilance, a vessel that until 3 days ago had appeared on all scans as nothing more than a small mining operation in the asteroid belt. "Status report," she requested, surveying the tactical display where the remaining Verax vessels were represented as red points of light, most now retreating toward the outer system. "Perimeter secure, Captain," Lieutenant Commander Takeda reported. "We've neutralized 68% of their invasion force. The rest are falling back, but they're regrouping at Neptune's orbit rather than making a full retreat." Reyes nodded. "They're adaptable. That's why they've been successful for so long." She turned to her communications officer. "Prepare another transmission. It's time to show them the full extent of what they're facing." Back in the Verax Council chamber, a new transmission interrupted their strategic assessment. Captain Rice appeared once more, but this time the background revealed she was no longer on Earth, but aboard a vessel of clearly advanced design. "High Council of the Verax Collective," she began, somehow knowing exactly who would be watching. "I am Captain Myarias of the United Earth Defense Force. Your invasion fleet has been neutralized, but I suspect you're already preparing a larger response. Before you commit to that course of action, there's something you should see." The transmission expanded to show a strategic map of not just Earth's solar system, but neighboring star systems as well. Points of light began to illuminate across the map, hundreds, then thousands of them. "For 50 years, we've been monitoring your conquests," Rice continued. "For 30 years, we've been preparing our response. These are not merely weapons platforms or defensive installations. They represent a fundamental shift in our approach to existence. While you evolved to conquer through fear, we evolved to survive our own self-destructive tendencies." One by one, stealth fields deactivated across multiple star systems, revealing human installations that had been invisible to Verax sensors. Mining operations in asteroid belts transformed into manufacturing centers. Research outposts on distant moons revealed themselves as weapons platforms. What appeared to be primitive colony ships heading toward nearby star systems shed their disguises, revealing vessels of war with technologies the Verax had believed to be centuries beyond human capability. Impossible, High Counselor Zivran whispered. No civilization develops this rapidly. When faced with extinction, Rise explained, as if hearing the unspoken doubt, humans achieve the impossible. When the first Verax broadcasts reached our outlying detectors, we understood what we were facing. Rather than reveal our awareness, we created a facade, a carefully crafted illusion of a divided, technologically limited species. Behind that facade, we united as never before. Intelligence Commander Korvax's posture had become increasingly rigid as the implications sank in. High Counselor, if these revelations are accurate, they've been intercepting our communications for decades. They know our encryption, our tactical doctrine, possibly even your psychological weaknesses. Rise finished for him. Yes, just as you studied the psychological breaking points of 37 other civilizations, we studied yours. The difference is that we learned from their mistakes rather than exploiting them. The strategic map zoomed in to focus on Veros Prime itself, where dozens of previously undetected human stealth ships now revealed their positions in high orbit. We could end this now, Rice stated flatly. We could employ the same ruthlessness that has defined your expansion. Instead, we offer terms. In the Geneva facility, the real United Defense Council watched the transmission with mixed emotions. General Wei leaned forward, his expression grim. Is this wise, Captain? Revealing our full capabilities rather than maintaining the advantage of surprise. Admiral Okafor shook her head. This isn't about tactical advantage anymore. Why? This is about establishing a new paradigm. The Verax only understand dominance hierarchies. Rise is speaking their language. On the inescapable verdict, now limping back toward Verax space, with critical systems failing, Supreme Tactician Vextal watched the transmission with dawning horror. The species they had dismissed as primitive had not only anticipated their attack, but had prepared a counterstrike that threatened the collective's very existence. Your terms, High Counselor Zivran asked, her voice carefully controlled despite the existential threat now revealed. Immediate cessation of all conquest operations, liberation of all subjugated worlds with full restoration of their sovereignty, reparations to be determined by an intergalactic tribunal. Rise paused. In exchange, Earth will share certain technologies, not weapons, but advances in medicine, sustainable energy, and environmental restoration that your pursuit of expansion has caused you to neglect. The offer hung in space between them. Not surrender, but transformation. Not destruction, but evolution. Zivran's neck membranes rippled in a complex pattern that reflected deep internal conflict. And if we refuse, then we demonstrate that we've learned your lessons too well, Rise answered simply. Humanity has spent millennia perfecting the art of war against ourselves. We would prefer not to employ those skills against another species, but make no mistake, we will survive, whatever the cost. The transmission ended, leaving the Verax High Council in stunned silence. For the first time in their 1,000-year history of expansion, they faced not just military defeat, but a complete invalidation of their worldview. A species that should have been easy prey had revealed itself to be a predator more dangerous than any they had encountered. In the following weeks, as negotiations proceeded under the watchful eyes of human stealth platforms positioned throughout Verax space, a new understanding began to take shape. The Verax, adaptable despite their arrogance, recognized in humanity something they had never encountered before. A species whose greatest strength was not its technology or biological advantages, but its capacity to unite against external threats while maintaining the internal diversity that drove innovation. They learned from watching us, Zivran observed during a private meeting with her inner council. They saw the broadcasts of our previous conquests and prepared accordingly. But there's something more profound here. They chose a different path than we would have in their position. They could have annihilated us, yet they offered coexistence. Intelligence Commander Korvax, now tasked with understanding human psychology rather than exploiting it, offered his analysis. It appears to be neither weakness nor mercy in the way we understand it. Rather, it's pragmatism. They recognize that extermination creates martyrs and seeds future conflicts. By offering us a dignified alternative, they secure a more stable peace. As the first Varax diplomats arrived on Earth, no longer as conquerors but as chastened peers, they were greeted by Captain Myarias, now appointed as Earth's first ambassador to galactic affairs. "Welcome to Earth," she said simply. "I trust you'll find that humanity looks different when you're not viewing us through the lens of conquest." In the years that followed, as the liberated worlds of the former Varax Collective began to rebuild with human assistance, a phrase entered the lexicon of spacefaring civilizations: remember the stars. What had begun as a code phrase activating Earth's defense network evolved into a galactic shorthand for a simple but profound truth. Sometimes the most dangerous species are not those that broadcast their power, but those that wait in silence, watching, learning, and preparing for the moment when the universe discovers exactly what they're capable of. The Varax learned this lesson at tremendous cost. Other potential conquerors now approach human space with extreme caution, having heard the stories of the civilization that revealed itself not through conquest, but through measured response. A species whose darkest capacity for violence remains visible only when absolutely necessary, like a weapon drawn but held in reserve, a reminder that sometimes the most effective deterrent is not what is done, but what could be done if pushed too far. In this way, humanity's position in the galactic community was established not through fear as the Varax had attempted, but through respect born of the understanding that beneath humanity's diplomatic overtures lies a capacity for total war that they deliberately choose not to unleash, a restraint that, paradoxically, makes them all the more formidable.